about this?
Oh, we have a peat update. Thank you, Peggy, very much for letting us know. We were talking about alternatives for using peat. There's something called Pitt Moss, manufactured near Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, that is made from recycled paper. They make quite a few different products, some of which have fertilizer, nutrient enhanced organic fertilizer in it. I have ordered some. It seems a little expensive to me for that, because that's for one cubic foot. But if it could keep the peat from getting dug out, it might be worth it. Reviewers that I took a look around said that watering can be difficult, and you often have to add perlite to it to really get it to water well. So we'll see. But Pitt Moss, clever invention.
Yeah.
So go outside now. Forget that we've been talking about indoor plants. Go outside. There's no better time to look at drainage in a garden than now. We've told you for years about stay off the beds. That's why they tell us not to garden until you see the forsythias bloom, that's too late. Don't wait till the forsythias bloom. But if you're going to go out and the garden and the soil is wet, if you can put a handful of soil and close your fist around it, if you open it up and that soil stays in a clump, when you poke it, it's too wet.
Or if your foot penetrates.
Yeah, right. Yes. Put your snowshoes on or put boards on top, or we used to use bundles of newspaper and then realized we could just wear the snowshoes. My foot, you might be able to tell from the picture, my foot in the lower thing is actually sinking in where Sonia's feet up above are not sinking in. That's Sonia up above.
You spread that weight on the side too.
Yeah, you spread it out. Because this is not a good thing to do. The questions that we got this week included ones about what should I use? Should I use sand to fill the ruts next to my driveway? You shouldn't fill them if that's the only thing that you're going to do. You should loosen them, and then you can add something to them.
Go out there with your fork. We know it's right along the road edge, and you may have to be careful how far in you go. And you may also find out that the original road edge is right in this area, that you may want to go ahead and strip that off rather than try to work it, but pop it up with a fork first. Loosen it,
because you'll see that there's water sitting in it. It's become compressed. It's not that it needs more soil, it needs more air. The air has been pressed right out of it because things have been sitting on it while it's been wet and cold. Inactive soil, you press on it, it's like squeezing a sponge, and they press the air out of it, and then it can't lift back up again because of the fact that there's no that's breathing around.
And your foot does just as much damage as that tire, even though it doesn't look like it.
Yeah, your foot does more damage than a car tire does.
Per square inch.
You're putting more pounds per square inch on your foot than on the car puts on the tire. So you can take a fork, put it in, pop it loose, or you can go ahead and aerate with a core aerator or a post-hole thickener like I'm doing there.
We have a quick handout.
Okay.
On Janet.
Yes, go for it.
Yeah, my maple tree, the little one in the back by the garage, had one of its branches basically strip in half.
Oh,
I know, and it's the top one. So my question is, we talked about it last week. I know I need to take it off down at one of the crotches. Should I do it now, or should I wait? As you were saying about the soil being wet and stuff.
You should do it now. There's a chance that it'll split, it'll tear further and do more damage to the cambium. So do it now and just either get bundles of newspaper or a board.
Or if you have to walk out there, go on back out with a fork and loosen it back up.
Yes. Good idea. Yes. Yeah, but take it off sooner rather than later.
Yeah.
I'm feeling a little bad about leaving all the snags that we've got in our yard. We're waiting for more of the branches to finish falling down. And we're also waiting because the arborists are really busy with the actual dangerous wood. All those widowmakers that are hanging up.
Okay.
I am sorry to hear that, but it will grow back.
Thank you.
Last week we talked about shade trees for clay soil, and Steve and I kind of got deer in the headlights looks, I think. In terms of drainage, when people say to us, I want to plant something in clay soil, and they've said it a lot. We've gone out to consult on somebody's garden or help them plant, and they said, I have this terrible clay soil. We will go out and dig some up, and it's not clay. And so it's hard for us to answer that question. This is poorly drained. You can
poorly drained.
And that's what you're looking for in the yard, are places where the water sits longer, because that same thing is happening underneath if the drainage isn't good, and those roots are sitting in water just as if they were in a pot that didn't have a drainage hole in it. Feel the soil before you call it clay. Put some in your hand and rub it through between your fingers. If it feels gritty at all, it's not clay. And we've seen soil real hard packed, hard to dig, and people say, well, this is clay soil. It's not clay, it's sand that's been compacted. So the difference is the texture is how much sand or silt or clay is in it, and the condition structure is how well and how fluffy it is. So it could be that it's not a clay soil you're talking about, but a poorly drained soil, and that's two different items. So I turned to a source that we just love, and we've told you about this book before. You can see how much we love it. It's Gary Heitschuh's Native Trees, Shrubs, and Vines for Urban and Rural America. One of the things we love about it are the charts that he has in it that tell us, in this case, the soil correlations. Does it like a coarse, that's sand soil? Is it like a moderately coarse or medium, that's a loam soil? Or does it like a fine soil, that's a clay soil? And we went through that and then cross-referenced it to some of our other books, like Michael Durr's books and Larry Flint's textbooks about trees and shrubs, and came up with a list for you. If you look down this list, for fine texture, I'm looking only for those things that are filled in underneath fine texture, if we want to talk about clay soil. And box elder, red maple, silver maple. And furthermore, because I'm concerned that people call it clay, but it's not really clay, I made the list for things that would also accept poor or very poor drainage, you see next to it. Because the soil in Gary's chart has the texture, but then also what kind of drainage it is, how moist it should be, whether it's acid or not. And I looked for only plants that were blacked against both fine texture and very poor or poor drainage. And it's not very many trees.
Not a big list.
So it's not a big list. It's on the and maybe Sonia will dump that into the chat again. There is a list, a file you can download from our website or from a link that we have in the chat. So you can have this list here. Why didn't we think of Kentucky coffee tree? I thought of the swamp.
Oh, no, yeah.
Right. And you will notice that there's an asterisk by only 2 plants on that list. Only 2 plants on the list. The swamp white oak that I'd recommended and the red maple that Steve mentioned are the only 2 that lined up to both very poor and fine texture. The rest of these were poor texture was okay, or like the hickory, they need good drainage, but like clay soil. I mean, what do you do with that? I also said crabapple, and crabapple is one of those that fits that description. But most people think crabapples aren't big enough. That's because they haven't seen a big crabapple as a shade tree. Are there questions about that?
There was actually, while I'm typing in, Jane had asked about what to do for all the arborvitae branches that were weighted down by heavy wet snow but haven't popped back up. I'm dropping in the article from Garden A to Z we talked about last week about tying those guys back up. The splayed arborvitae.
Splayed arborvitae, yeah. And we do have some pictures of some ones that are going to be very difficult for somebody to do, and there are a lot of them around. But we saved that for later because it is a topic that we already have talked a bit about. Thank you, Sonia, for keeping track of what we have on there already. We keep being surprised.
And we do have another sort of tree care one. Lou is asking, should you seal a large hole where large tree branches have broken off due to the snows? I see sap running in one of them. The sap isn't necessarily the issue, but I thought maybe if you wanted to address that question.
Yeah, sap is not. The tree is not losing something that it would have sent elsewhere. It's not losing resources for other branches by losing sap from a wound. It's sap that was flowing through those xylem tubes that were attached to that branch, and it's not a problem. There are some insects that it might attract, and the bees might swarm there, and certainly some of the wasps like that, but it's not a problem for the tree. And sealing wounds is something that's not necessary to do. If the wound is ripped, if that branch bark collar that we showed you, I think we showed you last week, yes. If that branch bark collar is damaged, then the plant can't effectively seal itself over. And then you have to think about taking back to a further branch if you want to really keep the plant healthy and intact.
We don't coat any of our cuts at all. I mean,
I've done on roses and on some.
Oh, you have?
Yeah.
Okay.
With the glue.
I haven't.
And then a question from Squeaks. A sure sign of spring are the prepay service agreements, which can be costly. How critical are arbor kelp treatments every year for ornamental trees and shrubs? Also, our Austrian pines have been treated for a type of foliar disease for 2 years now. Do you think this is critical? Will this likely be needed every year?
You might be asking the wrong people about whether it's critical, because we think the answer is almost always no. Kelp or other supplements, other nutrients would need to be based on a soil test and on the condition of the plant. Is the soil lacking in something? Is the plant lacking in something? Kelp and seaweed have a lot of micronutrients in them. They assimilated them into their own cells when they were growing, and when you dry them, they're still there. And so if the plant is in need of micronutrients, it might be something that they need to do. The Austrian pines do suffer from Diplodia tip blight, where the branches die back, and it's been very bad for 30 years.
They were very popular when I was going to get my degree. They were planted heavily at that time. We got tired of seeing Austrian pines. Now you look around, they're hard to find.
Right, because they found that they're very susceptible to that. If it's an important plant and it has shown some signs of getting some diplodia, then a treatment can help, but only as a preventive. And that's the other reason that we often say no. The services that offer these spray programs are going by calendar, and that's not going to work. They end up fertilizing on frozen soil, for instance, because 1 year it doesn't thaw as early as another time. The fungus becomes active about the time that the plant breaks bud, but they don't know when your plant breaks bud. Yours might be a week later than people that are at a lower elevation or a more sheltered place. So we say, if you're going to have something done, if you can do it for something have it done by somebody who can bring the equipment when you call and say, it's at bud break right now. Or if you're watching your Extension University's website that tells you what things are popping right now, which we called it the cat alert back in the days when it was done by paper, but the extension experts would warn you, now is the time. If your plants are at this stage of growth, now you need to put this on or do that.
Yeah, timing is everything with any kind of treatment. Lou mentioned that it was a big hole in the tree, large. I would have an arborist look at anything that's
if it's a large hole.
That's a large hole. I think I saw that in the chat.
Trees can stand very firmly with cavities inside of them. And there was a feeling long ago that you poured concrete in that or you filled it with foam, but that's not the feeling anymore, that air actually keeps that cleaner than otherwise. But an arborist can, with a couple of different pieces of equipment that they have, they can test for how much sound wood there is in the column that's actually holding up the tree, and they can tell you whether or not it's a dangerous tree, whether it's going to crack from that. Although I will say that most arborists that I know are going to err on the side of safety, and I was very upset about them taking down that tree at Virginia's house.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay, should we move on? Because I'd rather hear the questions. We'd rather talk what's going on out there right now than the things that. Okay.
I think we've got what people have been asking so far. Squeaks is just clarifying they've been getting treatment on the pine like clockwork 3 times a year during the season.
And I don't think it's necessary.
I would try it without and see what happens. I don't know. I don't like all the chemicals we're dumping into the no matter what kind of tree.
I don't understand that Diplodia though would have 3 different periods of infectious time. I'd have to look that up to see. Send me an email to remind me to look it up, and I'll look that up to see whether or not there's several different infection periods. Maybe there are. When people text us or email us, we give them some kind of an answer right then if we can, and then we expand on it or use their pictures to help you understand what's going on. So the things that are here, like Steve told me last night, we can save them for next week. We can talk about them next week. There's still time. If you've got questions now, get them in the chat or raise your hand.